Talk us through what's fundamentally changed in the energy market and the fact that Russian oil and gas have not been sanctioned. Does that make a difference?
Well, Russia is too big to sanction. The global market cannot survive without Russian oil, and certainly Europe cannot survive without Russian gas. So in every other area, Russia can be sanctioned. But when it comes to energy, it cannot be sanctioned. Now, fundamentals are very tight. Even without all the Ukraine crisis, at $85 is the minimum price of dictated by fundamentals. And the rest of it is fear, geopolitics, and whether there will be a deal with Iran or not. That's all baked into the price.
Doctor, you know, we've got a call for $115 a barrel for Brent crude. Do you think that that's conservative?
I think that if there is no deal with Iran and the Ukraine crisis continues, it could be well above those numbers. But so I think that in terms of the oil prices, we are seeing what's happening in Russia. It's all geopolitics. Supply demand has not been impacted yet, but the supply demand will be impacted by the Iran deal, which should be signed, if possible, by the end of this week or next week. If that is not done, the markets are so tight, the prices can go well above $115.
But Mr. Fesharaki, you say that Russia's too big to sanction, but over the weekend, the West has proven that they're actually ready to take the pain to make sure that they're sanctioned appropriately, including freezing the Russian central bank. How will Putin likely react, and what's the pain threshold that actually Western countries can deal? If oil goes to 150, I mean, they have the central banks to step in and support it.
Well, you know, the supply and demand for oil, the Russian oil is flowing. Urals is coming to, a lot of it is coming to Europe. A lot of the banks are worried about issuing letters of credit. It is discounted in the market, but is entering the market. And the payment will take place. The Russian gas, without Russian gas, Europe cannot survive. No question about it. There is no alternative to Russia when it comes to natural gas in Europe. These things, to be fixed, it takes a decade. It's not something which can be fixed by actions of the different governments. The US government says this, or the Qatari government says that. It has to be done on a long-term basis. For the time being, you cannot sanction Russian oil and gas business. The world needs it, and without it, there would be an incredible crisis. Much bigger crisis, economic crisis, than anybody can anticipate.
Dr. Fesharaki, can you make parallels to the 1970s during the Yom Kippur War, the price shock that we saw in the energy market? What's different this time around? What's unchanged?
Well, the difference was that at that time, you know, the Middle East countries were the big players. Now the US is a very big player, and so is Russia. So you have US, Russia, and Saudi Arabia are the three big players. But the role of Russia as a major exporter is critical, and most of the Russian exports are not going to Europe. Most of it is going to the East. So the Eastern markets are not going to worry about what's happening in Ukraine. They will continue to buy. There is no news I hear that either China or Korea or Japan have stopped or going to stop buying Russian oil. The only impact that you see is impact on Urals in Europe, and that is still flowing, but discounted. So yes, there are parallels, but the environment has changed so differently. The role of Russia is just too important to ignore.
Well, Doctor, what about the whole gas complex here as well? And, you know, you made allusions to Europe being unable to survive, perhaps, without gas coming out of Russia. But there have been a few steps taken to try and perhaps replace that by getting tankers in and the like.
These are all minor rounding errors. The fact is that the volumes which go through 4 pipelines to Europe, from Nord Stream 1, from Yamal, from the Ukraine pipeline, the Turk Stream, there is so much dependency built over a period of time. About a third, 30 to 40% of the European total consumption comes from Russia. It's not something that can be replaced by a few tankers here or there. When President Reagan many years ago said, don't build the pipelines from Russia to Europe, maybe he had a point. But once the deal is done and once the addiction has started, it takes a long, long time to change structure.
Doctor, I mean, if you look at what the U.S. is doing, I mean, they have quite a lot of LNG that they're at the moment selling to China just because they're paying for the higher price. What if that got diverted to Europe? I'm
sorry, that's not true. Both of the Chinese, whatever the U.S. is selling is under long-term contracts, and whatever is not contracted is coming to Europe. European prices are the highest. We don't need to say to anybody, please export to Europe. The European prices are the highest. So anybody who has a spare LNG sells it to Europe by definition. There is no need for governments to intervene. The volumes that the U.S. is selling to China is under long-term contracts. You can't cancel the contract and redirect it to Europe. And even if you do, it doesn't really cure the problem.